Hello, and welcome to another episode of Candid Conversations with Chris. On this episode, guest Sarah Jakes reveals the pain that led to her book, Lost and Found, and how being the daughter of one of America's greatest preachers has shaped her life. First of all, who is Sarah Jakes?
You are the first reporter to ever ask me who is Sarah Jakes. Everyone wants to know what it's like to be T.D. Jakes' daughter, and are often disappointed to find out that it's not as glamorous as Megafest is, that for the most part, he is just like any other father, and that my parents have been very normal, and I've seen him more times in a bathrobe than I have in a pulpit. And so because of that, there is an incredible amount of pressure to sell someone a dream, but it's not your truth. And I think that is the difficult part of being in legacy, is really embracing your reality and not being ashamed of it.
Let's talk about your book,
Okay.
Lost and Found.
Yes.
What prompted you to write this particular book?
Well, I started a blog about 3 years ago, and within 3 months the blog had 1 million hits. And to be honest, I never thought anyone would see the blog. I started it out of my own pain, my own frustration with my walk with God, and really felt like this blog would be my safe place where I could put out my personal feelings, and then, as if I were a friend looking on the outside of my life, offer some type of hope and advice. And it was that discussion, that internal discussion and war that I was having within myself, that inspired millions of other people. And so when I was approached by a publisher to write my story, my followers of my blog didn't recognize the wounds that they were gleaning from came from all of these detours within my life. And so for me, Lost and Found was my opportunity to be very transparent about what those lessons in the blog cost me.
And you're quite transparent in the book.
Yes.
You talk about having your first child at 14. You talk about a failed marriage. You talk about your spiritual journey to healing during the spiritual journey. Why was it so important for you to be so transparent?
Well, I think that there's this myth that if I would have had Bishop and Mrs. Jakes as my parents, then this wouldn't have happened to me. Or I would have somehow avoided the pain and snares of life. And so I wanted to dispel that myth, because the reality is that life doesn't spare its rod on any of us, and that you could be Bishop Jakes' daughter or, Thomas Jones' daughter, and you can still experience life. And so ultimately, it is up to us to not allow those shameful moments to define us, but to rather learn from them and grow. And so I felt like if I shared mine, that someone else would dare to embrace themselves. And I found their response to verify that and really give me a lot of peace and healing myself.
Yeah, huge response to that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this. You talk in the book about suffering from low self-esteem. What do you feel attributed to you feeling this low self-worth, if you will?
Well, I think that there's this pressure to really define who you are. We moved to Dallas. I was 8 years old, and people wanted to know if I was going to be the next Bishop Jakes. And I was 8, and so...
They want you to preach your first sermon,
Yeah. And when they find out that you can't sing and that you don't shout, or they notice you weren't worshiping in service, they want to know what's wrong with you. And so you start to believe that maybe there is something wrong with you, because I'm not reacting the way they want me to. There must be something wrong with me. And so I spent many years trying to figure out what was wrong with me instead of actually loving me.
I think many people don't think about that, because they don't think about the fact that you guys moved from West Virginia to Dallas. I mean, Dallas is this mega city you're coming to, and your friends are back in West Virginia, and you're having to readapt to this new environment and this new platform that your dad is now on. And they're, like you said, they're now expecting you to get up there and preach on the same platform at 8 years old. I mean, how ignorant of us.
Absolutely. I mean, there were 50 families at our church in West Virginia. The first Sunday in Dallas, 1,500 people joined our church. From the eyes of an 8-year-old, there was no moment where it went from 1,500 to 36,000, because it all seemed so big. Everyone was a stranger, and everyone wanted something from you.
How do you balance that when you're talking to young people about the things that you've been through, but now where the Lord has you?
Well, I think the reality is that people who find themselves in detours like our own don't recognize how you go from that to this. They don't think it's possible. They see this and they think that'll never be me. And so I share my story for the people like me who stopped believing in themselves, and for those who may have not who may not have experienced those challenges, I explained to them how difficult it was. And I certainly don't want to give anyone a license. And though I came out on the other side of a teen pregnancy, it took me almost 10 years to learn to love myself again. And if you would dare to learn from me, you won't have to go through the same thing that I went through. And I try to keep that in the forefront of my message. This isn't a license. This is a cautionary tale, but of grace nonetheless.
Yeah, man, it's good. What do you feel young people your age lie awake at night most troubled about?
Acceptance or the fear of rejection. We live in such a society that is willing to, there's a hub for every dysfunction that you have. And so, but in order to join the club of dysfunction, you have to be willing to admit that you have one.
Yeah.
And I think our biggest fear is that if I admit this, will they still accept me? If I admit that I'm suffering from low self-esteem, if I admit that I'm being bullied and I'm afraid, if I admit this or that, can I still be loved? Can I still be accepted? And I truly believe that, especially with my message in Lost and Found, that this is an opportunity to accept and love yourself and to not worry about where the arms are in the world, because ultimately you can't teach someone to love you if you don't love yourself. And we may find something that soothes our pain, but we want to be healed.
If readers take one thing away from Lost and Found, what would you hope that be?
So I want people to recognize that grace is on our shoulders. That if we dare to trust grace, if we dare to believe that all things really do work together for our good, that we can step out on grace in such a way where we dare to love ourselves, we dare to embrace our past, and we dare to be okay taking off a mask and being beautiful, flaws and all, in the sight of God. And so it is my prayer that everyone who reads this book sees the grace on their own shoulders.
Sarah Jakes,
Thank you.
thank you so much. Wonderful.